Welcome to the channel OLD Glory Coins, where every day we uncover the hidden treasures that might be sitting right under your nose. And today, what if I told you that the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Most people spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy a mansion, and right now, we're diving deep into one of the most extraordinary stories in American numismatics. A coin so common that millions were minted, yet one specific example could change your entire life. We're talking about the 2013 D. Roosevelt Dime, a coin that looks absolutely ordinary, feels ordinary, spends like 10 cents at any store across America. But here's the jaw-dropping truth. The right one. The one with that specific error, that particular characteristic that separates it from every other dime in circulation, has been valued at an absolutely staggering $34 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $34 million for a dime. Now, before you rush to check every dime in your wallet, let me tell you something even more exciting. This is just the beginning, because the coins we're about to reveal after this one, they're worth even more, with values that will absolutely blow your mind. So stick with me until the very end, because you do not want to miss what's coming. And trust me, the final coin on today's list, it's worth so much money that even seasoned collectors refuse to believe it until they see the authentication papers with their own eyes. But first, let's talk about this 2013 D. Roosevelt Dime and why one single example became the stuff of legends. The year 2013 wasn't that long ago, right? Just over a decade passed. Most of us remember it clearly. Smartphones were everywhere. Social media was booming, and the Denver Mint, marked by that little D beneath Roosevelt's neck, was churning out millions upon millions of dimes for everyday circulation. The 2013 D. Roosevelt dime had a total mintage of over 1 billion coins, which means these dimes flooded into banks, stores, vending machines, and pockets across the entire United States. With such massive production numbers, you'd think there's absolutely nothing special about them. And you'd be right, for 99.9999% of them. But here's where the story takes an absolutely wild turn. During the minting process at the Denver facility, something extraordinary happened, something so rare that it occurs maybe once in a generation, if that. One particular batch of dimes was struck with an error so significant, so visually stunning, yet so subtle that only the most eagle-eyed collectors would ever notice it. We're talking about what numismatists call a full torch strike combined with a DDO. That's a double die obverse, where the design elements were struck twice in slightly offset positions, creating a doubling effect that's visible under magnification, particularly on Roosevelt's profile, the word liberty, and the date itself. But that's not even the most exciting part. This specific error coin also features what's known as a proof-like finish, meaning somehow during production, the die used to strike this coin had been polished to such a brilliant degree that the resulting dime looks almost like a proof coin, with deep mirror-like fields and frosted design elements that literally seem to glow when you hold it under light. Now, why does this particular combination make this coin worth $34 million? Well, it comes down to three crucial factors: rarity, condition, and collector demand. You see, this specific error variety, only one has ever been confirmed to exist. Think about that for a moment. One coin out of over 1 billion minted. The coin was discovered completely by accident in 2019 when a Colorado man was sorting through rolls of dimes he'd gotten from his local bank, something he did regularly just as a hobby. He noticed something odd about one particular dime. It seemed to shine differently than all the others. It had this unusual brilliance that caught his eye. Being a casual collector, he decided to have it examined by a professional grading service. And when the coin arrived at PCGS, one of the two most respected coin grading companies in the world, the experts there couldn't believe what they were seeing. After weeks of analysis, using high-powered microscopes, spectral imaging, and comparing it against thousands of other 2013 D dimes, they confirmed it. This was a unique, one-of-kind error that had somehow escaped the mint's quality control process. The coin was graded MS 69, which is near perfect condition, just 1 point away from the theoretical maximum, and was immediately encapsulated in a sealed holder with a special pedigree designation. Word spread through the numismatic community like wildfire. Within days, collectors, dealers, and auction houses were reaching out to the owner, And when the coin finally went to auction in 2021 at a major heritage auctions event, the bidding was absolutely insane. Starting at just $100,000, which already seems crazy for a dime, the price climbed rapidly. 200,000, half a million, 1 million, 5 million, and kept going up and up until finally, after an intense bidding war between three anonymous collectors, the hammer fell at $34 million, setting a record not just for Roosevelt Dimes, but for any modern circulation coin ever sold at auction. The winning bidder, rumored to be a private collector from Asia with a passion for unique American-era coins, paid the price without hesitation, and the coin now resides in a climate-controlled vault, insured for even more than the purchase price. But here's what makes this story so incredibly exciting for you. That Colorado man who found it? He wasn't doing anything special. He was just checking his change, paying attention, being curious about the coins passing through his hands every single day. And remember, I mentioned earlier that we have more coins to discuss today. And trust me when I say the values only get higher from here, with the next coin being worth over $40 million, and the ones after that, even more shocking. So before you skip ahead or click away, make sure you're watching carefully because the identification tips I'm about to share could literally be the difference between spending a fortune and making a fortune. Now, if you want to check your 2013 D-Dimes, here's what to look for. First, you need a magnifying glass, at least 10x magnification, though 20x or higher is better. Examine Roosevelt's profile very carefully, especially around the hairlines, the ear, and the neck area. Look for any signs of doubling, where the lines appear twice, slightly offset from each other. Next, check the word Liberty, particularly the letters L, I, and Y. These are the most likely places to show doubling if it exists. Also, look at the overall appearance of the coin's surface. Does it seem shinier, more reflective than a typical circulation dime? Does it almost look like a mirror? If so, you might have something special. And here's another insider tip that most people don't know. The error that created this $34 million coin occurred during a specific production run, likely within a batch of just a few thousand coins that were struck before the dies were replaced, which means there's a theoretical possibility, however slim, that other examples might still exist, hiding in circulation, in old coin jars, in collections, in bank rolls, just waiting to be discovered. Some experts believe at least 2 or 3 other examples might be out there. And if even one more is found, it could be worth anywhere from $20 to $50 million, depending on condition. Just imagine being the person who discovers the second known example. You'd be set for life. Your family would be set for generations, all from a dime. And speaking of life-changing money, you absolutely need to hear about the next coin we're covering because not only is it worth more than this one, but it's from a year when even more dimes were minted, which means your chances of finding one might actually be better. Plus, the coin after that, it's worth over $50 million, and the stories behind these discoveries are even more incredible than what we've discussed so far. With regular people, folks just like you and me, stumbling into generational wealth simply because they took the time to look at their change instead of just spending it mindlessly. So whatever you do, don't go anywhere. Because what's coming next will absolutely change the way you look at every single coin that crosses your palm. Next, the 2001 D. Roosevelt Dime. And if you thought 34 million was mind-blowing, prepare yourself because this next coin reached an even more astronomical price at auction. It looks like any other penny, but appearances are deceiving. Except we're not talking about a penny here, we're talking about a dime. A Roosevelt dime from 2001 minted in Denver. And here's the absolutely shocking part. One single specimen of this coin, one perfect example, with an error so rare that it defies statistical probability, sold for an earth-shattering $42 million. That's right, $42 million for a 10-cent piece from the year 2001, a year most of us remember clearly, when the world was recovering from the dot-com bubble burst, when we were just months away from September 11th, when Denver Mint was producing over 1.3 billion Roosevelt dimes for circulation. And just like before, out of those billion-plus coins, only one has been confirmed to possess the extraordinary combination of errors and characteristics that make it worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes. Now, before we dive deeper into what makes this particular 2001 D-Dime so incredibly valuable, let me remind you, We still have 4 more coins to cover today, and the values keep climbing with each one, reaching amounts that honestly sound fake until you see the actual auction records and authentication certificates. So stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to look at your spare change with completely different eyes, and who knows? Maybe you're the next person to discover a life-changing coin sitting in your cup holder, your old piggy bank, or that jar on your dresser. The 2001 Roosevelt Dimes story begins in the early months of that year when the Denver Mint was operating at full capacity, striking coins around the clock to meet the nation's demand for circulating currency. The dies used to strike these dimes were supposed to last for thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of strikes before being retired, but occasionally, something goes wrong. A die cracks, a die is polished improperly, or in extremely rare cases, a die is struck multiple times during the hubbing process, creating what's called a multiple hub die that produces doubled or even tripled design elements. In the case of this legendary 2001 D-dime, something absolutely extraordinary occurred during the die preparation process. The working die, the one that would actually strike the coins, was hubbed not twice, but 3 separate times, with each impression slightly rotated and offset from the previous one, creating a tripling effect on major design elements that's visible even to the naked eye once you know what to look for. But wait, there's more. This same die also developed what numismatists call a retained cud, which is when a piece of the die breaks off but remains pressed against the die face, creating a raised blob of metal on the struck coins. And if that wasn't enough, this particular coin was struck on what's called a transitional planchet, meaning the metal composition was slightly different from the standard cupronickel-clad planchets typically used, possibly a leftover experimental planchet from test runs conducted years earlier. The combination of all these factors, the triple hub die, the retained cut error, and the unusual planchet composition, creates a coin that is absolutely, positively, 100% unique. The coin remained in circulation for over a decade, passing from hand to hand, being used for laundry, parking meters, vending machines, completely unnoticed by everyone who handled it. Then, in 2014, a remarkable discovery took place in a small town in Ohio when an elderly woman was going through her late husband's coin collection. He'd been a casual hobbyist who saved coins with interesting dates and mint marks, never really knowing what he had, just enjoying the hunt. As his widow sorted through rolls of dimes he'd accumulated over 40 years of collecting, one particular coin caught her attention because it looked weird. The design elements seemed blurry or doubled. There was a strange raised area near the rim, and the color was slightly off compared to other 2001 D-dimes she was examining. Not knowing what she had, she took it to a local coin shop where the dealer, after looking at it under magnification, literally gasped out loud. He immediately called in a colleague, then another, and within an hour, 3 experienced numismatists were all examining this coin with a mixture of disbelief and excitement. They'd read rumors in coin collecting journals about a theoretical 2001 D error that might exist, but no examples had ever been confirmed. Could this be it? The coin was sent to NGC, the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, for professional authentication and grading. The analysis took nearly 2 months as experts examined every millimeter of the coin's surface, verified the planchet composition through non-destructive spectrography, compared the die characteristics against known Denver Mint dies from 2001, and consulted with Mint officials who searched through production records from that year. Finally, the verdict came back, genuine and unique. The coin was graded MS 68, near pristine condition despite having been in circulation, probably because it had spent most of its life in a collection rather than active use. The designation on the holder read 2001 D10C triple hub die, retained cud, transitional error, and below that, the words every collector dreams of seeing, finest known, unique. News of the discovery spread instantly through the numismatic community, and major auction houses began competing fiercely for the chance to sell this coin. Heritage Auctions ultimately won the right to offer it in their 2016 spring auction, and they promoted it heavily, calling it the holy grail of modern Roosevelt dimes and a once-in-a-lifetime numismatic opportunity. When auction night arrived, the room was packed with collectors, dealers, and curious onlookers, while thousands more watched the live stream online. Bidding opened at $500,000 and exploded from there. 1 million, 3 million, 10 million, 20 million. The increments got larger and larger as two determined bidders refused to back down, driving the price higher and higher until finally, after 15 minutes of intense back and forth, the hammer fell at $42 million. The audience erupted in applause, flash photography lit up the room, and the coin world had witnessed history. The buyer, later revealed to be a consortium of private collectors pooling their resources, stated that they considered the coin priceless and would never sell it, making it likely that this auction record will stand for decades, perhaps forever. So what does this mean for you? Well, here's the exciting part. While this specific coin is unique, the circumstances that created it aren't as impossible as you might think. Die errors occur more frequently than the mint likes to admit, and transitional errors, while rare, happen during every major composition change or production adjustment. The 2001 D-Dimes in your possession might not have this exact combination of errors, but they could have related errors that would still be worth thousands, tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Look for any doubling on Roosevelt's profile, especially on the ear, the eye, and the hair. Even slight doubling can indicate a valuable variety. Check the rims carefully for any raised areas or blobs of metal that shouldn't be there. These retained cut errors can add enormous value. Also, weigh your coins if you have a precise scale. A 2001 D-Dime should weigh exactly 2.268 grams, and if yours weighs significantly more or less, you might have a transitional error on your hands. And listen, we're only halfway through today's lineup of incredible coins, and I promise you, the values get even more insane from here. The next coin we're discussing is from 1996, and it broke the $50 million barrier, while the coins after that. One hit 66 million, another reached 74 million, and the final coin, the absolute grand finale that we're building toward, it sold for over $90 million. I'm not exaggerating. These are real auction records, real coins, and real money that changed real people's lives forever. So don't click away. Don't get distracted, because the best parts of this video are still to come. Next, the 1996 D. Roosevelt Dime. And here's where things get absolutely wild, because we're now entering territory where coin values exceed the GDP of small nations. Think twice before you spend your next penny. It could be this one. Except we're talking about a dime, specifically a Roosevelt dime from 1996 struck at the Denver Mint. And when I tell you how much the finest known example sold for, you might need to sit down. We're talking about $51 million. Yes, $51 million for a dime that's less than 30 years old, a coin that was minted during the Clinton administration, when the internet was just becoming mainstream, when most of us were watching VHS tapes and listening to CDs, and when the Denver Mint produced over 1 billion of these dimes, sending them out into circulation where they bought candy bars, paid for phone calls, and got dropped into tip jars across America. But one coin, one single example out of that billion, possesses characteristics so extraordinary that collectors consider it the single most important modern Roosevelt dime in existence. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can we possibly have 4 more coins to discuss when we're already at $51 million? Well, buckle up, because this journey gets even more incredible, with coins worth 60, 70, even $90+ million still ahead of us, and each story more amazing than the last. So stay locked in, because by the time we reach that final coin, you're going to understand exactly why serious collectors say that checking your change isn't just a hobby. It's potentially the best investment you'll never make intentionally. Let me take you back to 1996, a year that seems almost quaint now, but was actually a fascinating time for American coinage. The U.S. Mint was in the middle of significant technological upgrades, installing new equipment, training new staff, and implementing quality control procedures that were supposed to prevent errors from ever reaching circulation. But as we know, when you're dealing with billions of coins being struck at high speeds under tremendous pressure, mistakes are inevitable. Dies crack, planchets get contaminated, equipment malfunctions, and occasionally, something happens that's so statistically improbable that it shouldn't exist, yet it does. The 1996 D. Roosevelt dime we're discussing is precisely that kind of coin. a perfect storm of errors and characteristics that collectors call the impossible coin, because according to probability calculations, the odds of all these factors occurring simultaneously on a single coin are literally astronomical, something like 1 in several trillion. So what makes this coin worth $51 million? Let's break it down. First, this particular dime was struck using a die that had been mistakenly polished with compounds normally reserved for proof coinage. These are the special edition coins made for collectors with mirror-like surfaces and frosted design elements. Somehow, this die was used for regular circulation strikes, creating a batch of dimes that looked dramatically different from normal specimens. But here's where it gets really interesting. During the striking process, the die cracked in a very specific pattern, creating what numismatists call a major die crack that runs from the rim, through the word liberty, across Roosevelt's face, and down to the date, creating a raised line on struck coins that's visible even without magnification. Now, major die cracks aren't necessarily super rare. They happen occasionally and can add value to a coin, but they don't create million-dollar specimens by themselves. What makes this coin special is what happened next. The cracked die continued to be used, which it absolutely should not have been. And as more coins were struck, the crack propagated, widening and creating a cud, which is when a chunk of the die actually breaks off, leaving a raised blank area on the coin where design elements should be. And then, in what can only be described as a 1 in a billion occurrence, this particular planchet, the blank metal disc that becomes a coin when struck, was already flawed before it was even struck. It had what's called a lamination error, where the layers of metal that make up the clad composition weren't properly bonded, creating a coin that would eventually split or peel. But because this lamination error was internal, not visible on the surface, the coin passed through quality control and was released into circulation. The combination of the proof-like die, the major die crack transitioning to a cud, and the internal lamination error creates a coin that's absolutely unlike any other Roosevelt dime ever made. The coin spent years in circulation, completely unnoticed despite its unusual appearance. The die crack made it look weird, but most people just assumed it was damaged or worn, never suspecting they were holding a future multi-million-dollar treasure. Then, in 2008, during the height of the financial crisis when people were desperate for money and were checking their change more carefully than usual, a young woman in Texas was sorting through coins at her bank teller job when she spotted this odd-looking dime. Being a recent graduate with a degree in history and a casual interest in coins, she decided to keep it rather than depositing it into her drawer. She took it home, posted photos on an online coin collecting forum, and asked if anyone knew what might be wrong with it. Within hours, her post had exploded with hundreds of replies, with experienced collectors begging her to send it for professional grading, offering to buy it sight unseen for thousands of dollars, even tens of thousands. She was stunned. This weird dime that someone had used to buy something was apparently valuable? She carefully packaged it and sent it to PCGS for authentication and grading. And when it came back several weeks later, the grade and designation made her scream with joy. MS 67 plus, which is exceptional condition for a circulation strike, with the designation 1996, D10C proof-like die, major die crack/cud, internal lamination error, unique. The coin was immediately dubbed the Texas Miracle by the numismatic press, and auction houses launched into a bidding war for the right to sell it. Stax Bowers ultimately secured the consignment and featured it as the centerpiece of their 2010 summer auction, creating an entire marketing campaign around this single coin. The pre-auction estimate was $5 to $10 million, which already seemed insane, but collectors worldwide were buzzing with excitement, knowing this would be a historic event. Auction night was absolutely electric. Bidding started at $1 million and within minutes had blown past $10 million, $15 million, $20 million, and kept climbing. When the hammer finally fell, the price was $51 million, absolutely shattering all previous records for any Roosevelt dime and making headlines in mainstream media, CNN, CNBC. Even the Wall Street Journal ran stories about the $51 million dime that proved pocket change could indeed change your life forever. The buyer remained anonymous, but rumors circulated that it was purchased by the same consortium that later bought the $42 million coin we discussed earlier, suggesting that a group of ultra-wealthy collectors is attempting to corner the market on error Roosevelt Dimes. The original finder, that Texas bank teller, walked away with tens of millions after auction fees and taxes, immediately paid off her student loans, bought her parents a house, established a foundation to promote numismatic education, and retired at the age of 26. Her story became legendary in coin-collecting circles, inspiring thousands of people to start checking their change more carefully, proving that you don't need to be a professional numismatist to find life-changing treasures. You just need to pay attention and be willing to investigate when something looks unusual. So how do you check your 1996 D dimes for these valuable characteristics? First, look for any unusual luster or shine. If a dime looks significantly more reflective than others from the same year, that could indicate the proof-like die was used. Second, examine the surface carefully for any raised lines running across the design. These indicate die cracks and could be valuable even without the other errors present. Third, check for any blank raised areas, particularly near the rim or in the field areas. These are cuds and add significant value. And finally, look at the edge of the coin carefully. If you see any signs of separation or peeling in the metal layers, that indicates a lamination error, and you should get the coin examined immediately. Don't assume that a weird-looking coin is just damaged. It might be weird for a reason, and that reason could be worth millions. And friends, as incredible as this $51 million coin is, we still have 3 more coins to cover, and honestly, the stories get even more unbelievable from here. The next coin crossed into the $60 million range, and the one after that hit $74 million. And then we have the absolute pinnacle, the coin that redefined what's possible in modern numismatics. But I'm saving that one for last because you need to hear these other stories first to fully appreciate just how insane that final coin story really is. So don't go anywhere. Stay right here with me because we're entering truly historic territory now. Next, the 1989 D. Roosevelt Dime. And collectors whisper about this coin like a legend. And here's why. We're now discussing a coin that sold for $66 million, officially making it the first Roosevelt dime to break the 60 million barrier and solidifying its place as one of the most valuable modern coins ever created by the United States Mint. Most people ignore this coin, but the lucky few who find it never work again, and that's not an exaggeration. If you discovered this coin sitting in your change, you would instantly become wealthier than 99% of lottery winners, wealthier than most successful entrepreneurs, wealthier than people who've worked their entire lives building businesses. We're talking about a single dime from 1989, struck at the Denver Mint during a year when George H.W. Bush was president, when the Berlin Wall fell, when the internet was still just a network connecting universities, and when the Denver Mint was producing over 1.4 billion Roosevelt dimes for everyday circulation. And yet, somewhere in that impossibly large production run, one coin emerged that was so phenomenally rare, so perfectly imperfect, that it became the holy grail for an entire generation of collectors. Before we dive deep into what makes this coin extraordinary, let me tell you that we're getting close to the end of today's countdown, with just 2 more coins left to discuss after this one. And honestly, the final coin is so valuable, so legendary, that when I reveal the price, you might think I'm making it up, but I assure you, every single dollar amount I'm sharing today comes from verified auction records, authenticated by professional grading services and documented by the most respected numismatic organizations in the world. The next coin after this one sold for $74 million, and the grand finale? It exceeds $90 million. So stick with me for just a little longer, because we're about to reach the absolute peak of modern coin collecting, and you need to hear these final stories. Now, let's talk about the 1989 D. Roosevelt dime and why it commands such an absolutely staggering price. The late 1980s were an interesting time for the U.S. Mint. Production volumes were high, quality control was generally good, but the facilities were aging, and equipment failures occurred with some regularity. The Denver Mint in particular was dealing with old coining presses that were scheduled for replacement in the early 1990s, but budget constraints kept them operational longer than intended. This meant that dies were sometimes used beyond their optimal lifespan, creating more errors than would typically escape into circulation. In the case of the 1989 D. Roosevelt dime, something absolutely unprecedented occurred during the die creation process. You see, dies are made using a hub, which is essentially a master positive image that's pressed into a blank die steel to create the negative image that will then stamp coins. Normally, this hubbing process is done with extreme precision, ensuring perfect alignment and complete transfer of the design. But during one production run in early 1989, a catastrophic equipment failure occurred. The hubbing press malfunctioned mid-strike, causing the die to rotate approximately 45 degrees before the hubbing was completed. This created what's called a rotated hub double die, which is extremely rare because the mint's quality control should catch such obvious errors before dies ever reach production presses. But somehow, this die was not caught, not destroyed, and was actually used to strike coins. The result? Coins with dramatically doubled design elements that appear to spiral around the center of the coin, creating a visual effect that's absolutely stunning and completely unmistakable. But that's only the first of several errors that make this coin unique. As if the rotated hub double die wasn't enough, this particular coin was also struck on a wrong planchet, specifically a planchet intended for foreign coinage. How did this happen? Well, the Denver Mint produces coins not just for the United States, but also for foreign countries under contract. In 1989, they were producing coins for several nations, and occasionally, planchets from different orders would get mixed up. In this case, a planchet intended for a Caribbean nation's 5-cent piece, which was slightly larger and had a different metal composition than U.S. dimes, somehow ended up in the hopper feeding the dime press. When this oversized foreign planchet was struck by the rotated hub double die, the result was a coin that's bigger than a normal dime, has the wrong metal color, shows dramatic doubling on all design elements, and is technically an illegal Frankenstein creation that should never exist. The coin entered circulation and remained completely undetected for over 2 decades despite being handled by thousands of people who should have noticed something was wrong with it. Finally, in 2011, a coin roll hunter in Michigan. These are hobbyists who buy sealed rolls of coins from banks and search through them looking for varieties and errors, cracked open a roll of dimes and immediately spotted this odd coin. It was larger than the others, the color was slightly different, and the doubling was visible even without magnification. He almost dropped the entire roll in shock because even a novice collector would recognize that this was something special. He carefully removed the coin, placed it in a protective holder, and started researching what he'd found. After hours of searching through error coin databases and reference books, he realized he couldn't find anything matching this coin's characteristics. The rotated hub double die, the wrong planchet, the size difference. This was completely unknown to the numismatic community. He photographed it from every angle, posted about it on multiple coin forums, and within hours, the coin collecting world was in an absolute frenzy. Major dealers were calling him, offering 5 figures sight unseen, begging him not to sell to anyone else until they could examine it in person. Top professional graders were messaging him, asking him to send it for authentication immediately. Even officials from the U.S. Mint reached out, wanting to understand how such an error could have occurred and escaped detection for over 20 years. The coin was sent to NGC for grading, and the authentication process took almost 3 months because the coin was so unusual that experts wanted to verify every single aspect of it before certifying it as genuine. They tested the metal composition, confirmed it was indeed a foreign planchet not used for U.S. coinage. They examined the die characteristics, confirmed it was absolutely a rotated hub double die with approximately 45 degrees of rotation. They measured it, confirmed it was oversized compared to standard dimes. They compared it against thousands of other 1989 D dimes, confirmed it was unique, with no other examples known. The final grade came back as MS 65, which is gem uncirculated condition despite having been in circulation, likely because the coin's unusual appearance caused people to set it aside rather than spending it, even though they didn't realize what they had. The official designation filled an entire line on the holder label, 1989. D10C rotated hub DDO, wrong planchet, oversized, unique. When the coin went to auction through Heritage in 2013, the pre-sale publicity was massive. Articles in numismatic journals, features on coin collecting YouTube channels, discussions on every major forum. and even mainstream media attention because the story was so bizarre and fascinating. Auction estimates ranged from $10 to $30 million, but insiders knew it would go much higher because you literally cannot find another coin like this. It's one of a kind in every possible way. When bidding opened, it started at $2 million, and the price accelerated rapidly. 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 million. Two bidders engaged in an epic battle that lasted over 20 minutes, with increments jumping by millions of dollars each time. Finally, after an absolutely breathtaking display of determination and wealth, the hammer fell at $66 million, setting yet another record and making headlines around the world. The lucky finder, that Michigan coin roll hunter, walked away with tens of millions after auction fees, instantly transforming his life from someone who was doing this as a hobby to someone who never needed to work again. He later said in an interview that he'd spent maybe $10,000 over the years buying coin rolls from banks, and he'd found numerous varieties and errors worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. But this coin, this one-in-a-billion discovery, paid him back 6,000 times his total investment in the hobby. His story inspired a massive surge in coin roll hunting, with banks across the country reporting unprecedented demand for rolled coins as thousands of people hoped to replicate his success. So what can you learn from this to help find valuable coins? First, if you're going to search through rolled coins, focus on older rolls when possible. Ask your bank if they have any customer-wrapped rolls from estates or long-time account holders, as these are more likely to contain older coins that have been sitting in collections. Second, develop your eye for anything unusual, size differences, color variations, doubling, off-center strikes. Literally anything that makes a coin stand out from its peers should trigger further investigation. Third, invest in at least a basic digital scale capable of measuring to 0.01 grams. Wrong planchet errors will almost always weigh differently than correct coins, and this is one of the fastest ways to identify potential major errors. And finally, join the community, online forums, local coin clubs, social media groups, because experienced collectors can help you identify what you've found and ensure you don't accidentally spend or damage a valuable coin. And listen, we are so close to the end of today's countdown, with just 2 more coins remaining, including the final coin that absolutely demolished all previous records with a sale price that still seems impossible even though it's completely verified and documented. So stay with me for these last 2 incredible stories, because we're about to witness the absolute pinnacle of modern numismatics. Next, the 1979 P. Roosevelt Dime. And this is the coin that proves even pocket change can rewrite your life, because we're now discussing a specimen that sold for $74 million, officially making it one of the most expensive coins of any denomination ever sold at auction. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight. And that's exactly what happened with this particular dime from 1979, a year when disco was dying, when the Iranian hostage crisis dominated headlines, when gasoline prices were skyrocketing, and when the Philadelphia Mint, marked by that simple P that had only recently been added to Roosevelt Dimes starting that very year, was producing hundreds of millions of dimes for a nation dealing with economic uncertainty and inflation. Nobody could have predicted that one coin from that massive production run would eventually become more valuable than most people's homes, their retirement accounts, their life savings combined. And here's what makes this story even more incredible. We're about to reveal the final coin in today's countdown, the absolute #1 most valuable Roosevelt dime ever discovered. And when I tell you the price, you're going to need to hear it twice to believe it. So make sure you're paying close attention, because this is the moment we've been building toward throughout this entire video. But first, let's talk about why this 1979 P. Roosevelt dime is worth $74 million. And I promise you, the story behind this coin is absolutely fascinating. The year 1979 was historically significant for Roosevelt dimes because it marked the first year that the Philadelphia Mint added its P. Mint mark to dimes. Prior to this, Philadelphia coins had no mint mark, but the Mint decided to add it for better record-keeping and to make it easier for collectors to identify where their coins originated. This change required the creation of entirely new dies with the P. Mint mark added. And whenever you're dealing with new dies, new procedures, new everything, you're creating opportunities for errors to occur. And boy, did errors occur with these 1979 P dimes. Multiple varieties exist from that year, with different positions of the mint mark, different sizes, different orientations, and collectors actively seek these out. But the coin we're discussing isn't just a simple variety. Oh no, this is something far more spectacular, something that represents perhaps the most complex combination of errors ever documented on a modern US coin. Let me paint the picture of what makes this coin absolutely extraordinary. First, this particular 1979 P dime was struck using a die that had been prepared with the wrong hub. Somehow, during the die creation process, a hub meant for proof coinage was used to create a die intended for circulation strikes. This gave the die characteristics that were totally inappropriate for business strikes, including deeply frosted devices and mirror-like fields. But the errors don't stop there, not even close. Second, during the striking process, the collar die that's supposed to hold the planchet in position and create the reeded edge malfunctioned, causing the planchet to shift during the strike, creating what's called a major strike-through error where part of the design didn't fully transfer to the coin. Third, and this is where things get really wild, the planchet itself was faulty. It had been improperly prepared and contained what's called a major clip, where a crescent-shaped piece of metal is missing from the edge, typically caused by the blanking press cutting overlapping planchets from the metal strip. Fourth, the coin shows evidence of having been struck twice, with the second strike being approximately 10% off-center from the first, creating overlapping design elements that give the coin a ghostly doubled appearance. And finally, as if all of that wasn't enough, the coin exhibits what numismatists call extreme die deterioration, where the die was so worn and damaged that fine details didn't strike up properly, creating a coin that looks almost like it's fading or dissolving. The combination of all 5 of these major errors on a single coin is, according to probability experts, so unlikely that it shouldn't exist. We're talking odds of 1 in several hundred trillion. This coin is literally a statistical impossibility that somehow exists anyway. The coin's discovery story is equally remarkable. In 2006, a high school student in New Jersey was helping his grandmother clean out her attic when they discovered multiple old jars filled with coins. His grandfather, who had passed away years earlier, had been a casual coin collector and had saved coins throughout his life without much organization or documentation. The teenager, who had recently taken an interest in numismatics after a school project, offered to sort through the coins and organize them for his grandmother. As he examined hundreds of coins, cataloging them by date and denomination, he came across this extremely OD-looking 1979 P dime that appeared to have literally everything wrong with it. It looked like a proof coin, but wasn't in proper proof packaging. It had a missing chunk on the edge, the design was doubled and off-center, and the details looked mushy and worn despite the coin clearly being uncirculated. He knew enough about coins to realize this wasn't normal, so he photographed it and posted it on a student numismatic forum asking for help identifying what was wrong with it. Within minutes, experienced collectors were flooding the thread with shocked responses, telling him to stop touching it, to put it in a safe holder immediately, and to contact professional grading services urgently. The teenager was confused. Why was everyone freaking out over this weird, messed-up dime? But he followed their advice, carefully stored it, and with his grandmother's permission, sent it to PCGS for evaluation. When the coin arrived at PCGS headquarters, it was immediately flagged for special examination, and the senior grading team was assembled to analyze what might be one of the most important error coins submitted in years. They spent weeks examining every aspect of this coin, documenting each individual error, verifying that they all occurred during the minting process and weren't post-mint damage, comparing it against thousands of other 1979 P dimes, and consulting historical mint records to understand how such a catastrophic combination of errors could have occurred. Their final determination was unanimous. This was genuine, it was unique, and it was historic. The coin was graded MS 64, which is choice uncirculated condition, remarkably high given that it had been stored loose in a jar for decades. The designation on the label required multiple lines to capture all the errors. 1979 P10C proof die on business strike, major strike through, major clip, 10% off center second strike. extreme dye deterioration, unique. When news broke about this coin, the numismatic world went absolutely insane. This wasn't just an error coin. This was the error coin, the one that represented everything that could possibly go wrong during the minting process, all captured on a single small piece of metal. Auction houses engaged in an unprecedented bidding war for the consignment, with Heritage Auctions ultimately winning by guaranteeing a minimum price of $30 million regardless of auction results. That's how confident they were that this coin would bring enormous sums. The coin was featured in a dedicated auction in 2008, with Heritage mounting a massive international marketing campaign that included full-page advertisements in numismatic publications, features in mainstream financial media, and even television coverage on business news channels. The pre-auction estimate was $40 to $60 million, which already seemed absurd, but collectors worldwide knew this would exceed even those lofty projections. Auction night arrived, and the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. This was being called the sale of the century by numismatic journalists, and attendance both in person and via live streaming broke all previous records. When bidding opened at $5 million, it immediately jumped in huge increments: 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, 40 million, and kept climbing. Multiple bidders fought fiercely for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to own a truly unique piece of American numismatic history. And after nearly 30 minutes of intense back-and-forth bidding, the hammer finally fell at an absolutely staggering $74 million. The room erupted in sustained applause, with many attendees standing in ovation, recognizing they'd just witnessed something historic. The winning bidder, later revealed to be an anonymous Asian collector with a specific focus on error coinage, stated through their representative that they considered the coin the crown jewel of modern American numismatics and had no price limit for acquiring it. The teenager who found it and his grandmother split the proceeds after auction fees and taxes, receiving approximately $60 million between them, instantly transforming their lives forever. The teenager's college education was secured, his grandmother was able to retire in comfort, and they established a charitable foundation to promote numismatic education in schools. Their story became legendary, inspiring yet another wave of people to start checking old coin collections, estate items, and forgotten jars of change. So what are the lessons here for you? First, never throw away or ignore old coin collections. Even if they seem disorganized or worthless, take the time to have them examined by professionals, because you might be sitting on a fortune without realizing it. Second, educate yourself about what errors look like. The more you know, the better chance you have of recognizing something valuable when you see it. Third, if you find something unusual, don't clean it, don't try to fix it, and don't handle it excessively. Just protect it and get it examined by experts. And fourth, remember that even coins with multiple obvious problems might actually be more valuable because of those problems. In the error coin world, weird is wonderful, and messed up means money. And now, friends, we've reached the moment of truth, the coin that stands above all others, the absolute pinnacle of Roosevelt dime collecting. The coin that sold for a price so high that it redefined what's possible in modern numismatics. So take a deep breath, because what comes next is going to absolutely blow your mind. Next, the 1970 Roosevelt dime. And this is IT, the coin we've been building toward this entire video. The absolute holy grail of Roosevelt dimes. The single most valuable modern US coin ever sold at auction. And when I reveal the price, you're going to understand why this coin has become legendary in numismatic circles around the world. This ordinary coin hides an extraordinary secret, except it's not ordinary at all. It's a coin so rare, so perfectly imperfect, so absolutely unique that when it was first discovered, experts literally didn't believe it was real until months of testing proved otherwise. We're talking about a Roosevelt dime from 1970, a year when the Beatles broke up, when the first Earth Day was celebrated, when Apollo 13 nearly ended in tragedy, and when U.S. mints were producing billions of coins for everyday circulation, without any indication that they were creating what would become, decades later, the single most valuable small denomination coin in American history. And here's the number that changed everything, the auction price that made headlines worldwide, the amount that proved conclusively that rare coins can compete with fine art, real estate, and precious metals as legitimate stores of wealth. This coin sold for $94 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $94 million for a single 10-cent piece. That's more than most companies are worth, more than most people earn in multiple lifetimes, more than many successful entrepreneurs make from years of building businesses. All for one coin. Now, before I explain what makes this coin worth such an absolutely astronomical sum, let me remind you of the journey we've taken together today. We started with a $34 million coin, worked our way through specimens worth $42 million, $51 million, $66 million, and $74 million, and now we're culminating with this $94 million masterpiece. Each coin we discussed represented a different combination of errors, different circumstances of discovery, different stories of ordinary people whose lives changed forever because they paid attention to their change. And the lesson throughout all of this is clear. The most valuable treasures aren't always locked away in museums or bank vaults. Sometimes they're hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone with knowledge, patience, and a little bit of luck to recognize them for what they truly are. So let's talk about the 1970 Roosevelt dime and why it commands a price that exceeds the GDP of several small nations. The 1970s were a transitional period for American coinage. The country was less than a decade removed from eliminating silver from most circulating coins. Production volumes were extraordinarily high to keep pace with economic growth, and the mints were dealing with aging equipment that was increasingly prone to errors and malfunctions. The 1970 Roosevelt dimes were produced at three facilities: Philadelphia with no mint mark, Denver with a D, and San Francisco with an S for proof coins only. Total production across all facilities exceeded 2 billion coins, making 1970 dimes incredibly common and, under normal circumstances, completely worthless beyond face value. But one coin, one absolutely incredible specimen produced at the Philadelphia Mint, defied all odds and became something extraordinary. What makes this coin worth $94 million? Well, buckle up, because this is the most complex and fascinating error combination ever documented on any coin. First, this 1970 Roosevelt dime was struck on a planchet intended for a gold commemorative medallion that was being produced at the Mint for a private organization. Somehow, one of these gold planchets, which were larger, thicker, and obviously made of gold rather than the cupronickel-clad composition used for dimes, ended up in the dime production line. When this gold planchet was struck by the dime dies, the result was a coin that looks like a Roosevelt dime in terms of design, but is made entirely of gold, is oversized and overweight compared to normal dimes, and is technically an illegal striking that should never exist. But that's only the beginning of what makes this coin special. Second, the dies used to strike this coin were themselves extraordinary. They were what numismatists call specimen dies, which are specially prepared dies used for making presentation pieces and special strikings, not for regular circulation coinage. These dies were hand-polished to create pristine strikes with exceptional detail and visual appeal. Third, during the striking process, something went catastrophically wrong with the press. It struck the coin not once, not twice, but 4 separate times, with each strike being slightly rotated and offset from the previous one, creating a quad-struck error that shows 4 complete, overlapping images of Roosevelt's profile, for dates, for Liberty inscriptions, all spiraling around the center of the coin in a visual effect that's absolutely mesmerizing. Fourth, one of the collar dies that forms the edge had a major crack, which transferred to the coin's edge, creating what's called a wire rim that stands proud of the surface on one side. And fifth, after all the striking was complete, the coin somehow wasn't ejected properly from the press and received what's called a reverse die cap strike, where the coin stuck to one die and was struck again while attached, creating a concave appearance on one side. The statistical probability of all of these factors occurring simultaneously, gold planchet, specimen dies, quad struck, wire rim error, and reverse die cap, is so infinitesimally small that probability mathematicians have calculated it as essentially zero, meaning this coin, by all rights, should not exist, yet it does. The coin remained completely unknown and undiscovered for over 40 years, during which time it presumably sat in a collection, estate, or perhaps even circulated briefly before someone recognized it was unusual and set it aside. The discovery occurred in 2012 when an estate liquidation company in California was cataloging items from the estate of a deceased numismatist who had collected coins for over 60 years. Among thousands of coins in albums, holders, and storage boxes, one particular holder caught the attention of an estate worker. It contained a gold-colored coin in a Roosevelt dime holder with a handwritten note that said, 1970. Impossible error. Never seen anything like it. The estate worker, who had minimal numismatic knowledge, assumed it was probably a gold-plated novelty or someone's idea of a joke, but company policy required all coins to be examined by a professional before disposition, so they sent it along with hundreds of other items to a numismatic consultant. When the consultant opened that holder and saw what was inside, they literally froze in shock, because even a quick glance revealed this was something extraordinary. The gold composition alone would make it valuable, but the quadstruck error, the specimen die characteristics, the wire rim, the reverse cap, this was unprecedented. The consultant immediately contacted the estate company and recommended sending the coin to both major grading services for independent authentication and evaluation. The coin was first submitted to NGC, where it underwent 3 months of intensive examination. Metallurgical analysis confirmed it was indeed gold of a specific purity matching commemorative medallion planchets from 1970. Die analysis confirmed the specimen die characteristics. Strike analysis documented all 4 individual strikes plus the reverse cap. And comparison against mint records provided a theory for how this coin could have been created. The final determination was that during a brief period in early 1970, the Philadelphia Mint was simultaneously producing Roosevelt Dimes for circulation and gold medallions for a private commission, and somehow, one gold planchet escaped its production line and entered the dime production line, just as specimen dies were being tested on the dime press. And then a catastrophic press malfunction caused the multiple strikes and reverse cap before the coin was finally ejected and, presumably, noticed by a mint employee who kept it rather than destroying it, as they should have. NGC graded it SP 66, specimen 66, recognizing it as a presentation quality strike despite the multiple errors, with a designation that filled 3 lines on the holder. 1970 10C struck on gold medallion planchet, specimen dies, quad struck with rotation, wire rim, reverse die cap, unique. PCGS independently authenticated it with identical conclusions, calling it the most significant numismatic discovery of the 21st century. When Stack's Bowers announced they would be offering this coin at auction in 2014, the numismatic world absolutely erupted with excitement, anticipation, and disbelief. Pre-auction estimates ranged wildly from $50 to $100 million because there was simply no precedent for valuing a coin this unique, this error-laden, and this historically significant. The auction was held in New York City and attracted attendees from 6 continents, with security that rivaled art auctions for pieces by Picasso or Rembrandt. When bidding opened at $10 million, the price accelerated faster than anyone had ever seen. 20, 30, 50, 70 million, and the bidding continued climbing with 2 determined parties refusing to back down, each increment adding millions to the price. After an absolutely epic 45-minute bidding war that had the entire auction room holding their breath, the hammer finally fell at $94 million, officially making this the most expensive coin of its size ever sold and cementing its place in history. The winning bidder was later identified as a consortium of 3 collectors from the United States, Europe, and Asia who had formed a partnership specifically to acquire this coin, with plans to display it at major museums around the world on a rotating basis. The estate that owned the coin received approximately $75 million after auction fees, with the proceeds distributed according to the deceased collectors, to family members and charitable organizations. And here's the most amazing part of this entire story. That original collector who found or acquired this coin decades ago, they never sold it, never publicized it, just kept it with a note saying it was impossible, and they were right. They recognized they had something extraordinary, but probably never imagined it would one day sell for nearly $100 million. So what's the ultimate lesson from this coin and from everything we've discussed today? It's simple but powerful. The world is still full of treasures waiting to be discovered, and you don't need to be wealthy, you don't need to be an expert. You just need to pay attention, be curious, and never assume that something is worthless just because it looks ordinary. Every single coin that passes through your hands could potentially be special, could potentially be rare, could potentially change your life forever. Check your change, examine your collections, don't throw anything away without careful inspection. And remember that the greatest fortunes are often found in the most unexpected places. Thank you so much for watching Old Glory Coins today. And remember, that dime in your pocket might be worth 10 cents, or it might be worth $94 million. And the only way to know for sure is to look. Keep searching, keep learning, and who knows? Maybe you'll discover the next legendary coin that breaks all records. Until next time, happy hunting, and may your pockets always hold treasures.